Hey folks, Alkers here with a quick patch review video for the 61.594 patch released on July 14th, 2022. The headline here is this is a pretty small patch. There's no real huge significant changes, just a couple balance tweaks here and there, some adjustments. All in all, good patch, but nothing as significant as some of the patches we've seen in previous weeks, which is probably a good thing. The game is stabilizing a little bit after the Steam release, and we'll probably continue to see minor tweaks and changes like this. Let's dive right in with the design changes. So there's an AI change to start us off with a schemer, orator, and diplomat AIs are going to be more peaceful. That makes a lot of sense, especially for the orators and diplomats. Change I'm personally excited about here, tactician units now do full counterattack damage. So this means that if you have a general that's a tactician on a unit, that unit will do full counterattack damage. I'm personally really excited to see this because I think the game needs some more counterattack damage. It's really disappointing to have an equivalent army and then lose because your opponent attacks first and wipes out half your army, and then you just don't have as many troops. Had you attacked first, you would be in that advantageous position. It feels a little unbalanced. So I feel like this change might be a great way for the game to start exploring what counterattack damage does in a limited way without necessarily making it so that defense suddenly and turtling is the correct strategy. All right, I've spawned some units in a combat arena test map. You can see here, without a tactician general, these horsemen would deal 5 damage to this swordsman and take 1 damage in return. If I then assign a tactician general, these horsemen will attack and deal 5 damage just as before. Now, instead of taking 1 damage in melee counterattack, they take full counterattack damage as if the swordsman attacked them. So that's super duper strong. It means that now with the tactician general, you can have a unit that can counterattack anything that attacks it. And indeed, if we end turn here and see what happens, we see that the AI chooses to attack and takes a ton of damage each time. And also goes ahead and assigns the general over there. And then we see what happens again here. Swordsman still counters attack. It's going to die, but normally these units would have taken not much damage at all. And now, look at how weak that unit is just because it fought that swordsman. That's super duper powerful. And I'm really excited to see this change because it means now you have a tactician general. You put it on a unit that's pretty strong and you put that unit in a fort. You can hold defensive choke points thanks to tactician. At the same time, it doesn't make the game so that every unit counterattacks and you can just turtle. And you probably only have a limited number of tactician generals, so makes those even more valuable. Previously, they weren't that great. All they could do is they didn't get crit, which okay, that's nice, but not that many units crit in the first place anyway. Now tactician is way more powerful. Really excited to see how this plays out and applaud the change because I think it's just a nice little tweak that introduces the notion of counterattacking to the game. And it's really going to be interesting to see how it plays. One other thing I wanted to check here, notice that ranged units do not take counterattack damage. If a ranged unit is attacking, it doesn't take any counterattack damage because it's ranged. That said, ranged units will deal counterattack damage when they're attacked in melee, not when they're attacked in range. So you can see here, this horseman attacking this longbowman with a tactician general will take counterattack damage because it's a melee attack. So the longbowman will fire back at this guy. However, the ranged camel archer attacking the longbowman will not take counterattack damage because it's a ranged attack, and ranged attacks don't get counterattacked. So if you end up seeing someone who's fortified a tactician general on a super defended spot, you're going to need to take it out with ranged units because the melee units will take a lot of counterattack damage. And that leads directly to our next patch note that unlimbered units don't do counterattack damage with tacticians. So that means if you have an onager in a fort with a tactician general, even if you melee that onager will not deal counterattack damage, unlike the longbowman we saw in the demonstration. And then the other part of this patch note is that limbered units now take a 25% defense penalty. So that means an onager that's moving around and hasn't been unlimbered has a severe defense penalty. You want your onagers to be unlimbered. Market upkeep costs have been removed. So today, the market takes 2 wood a turn, but on the test patch, that upkeep is gone. This is a nice change. Sometimes you can get a market from an event well before you have the tech. that 2 wood upkeep is a big drain on your economy. This makes it go away, makes this building a little more attractive to build. So good change overall. Specialist effects granted by freedom and constitution laws have been swapped. So on the test server, you'll now see that Constitution gives 1 science per year per urban specialist, and Freedom gives 4 gold per year per normal specialist. I think this is overall a good choice. It makes Constitution a little bit more attractive. And the extra gold from Freedom applies to all specialists, not just urban specialists, and makes Constitution a much more interesting choice against Tyranny. Previously, you would most of the time take Tyranny just because of the gold. Now, because there's science and urban specialists, that's potentially much more valuable. And Freedom will give you a nice little gold boost early on as well. So interesting change, makes Constitution a little bit stronger, Freedom a little bit weaker, which is fine considering that's an early game law. I would still think I would take Freedom, especially since that applies to rural specialists, and that's a pretty nice econ boost. But now Tyranny and Constitution is a little bit harder of a decision. I think I'm still probably leaning Tyranny, maybe, because of the gold, but we'll have to see how that Freedom gold weighs out. I don't know. It'll be definitely interesting to see. And Constitution, if you have a good civics capital, being able to build decrees there, especially if you don't have a statesman family, can be really attractive, as well as that science boost for urban specialists that previously Freedom had. That's also super duper attractive. It's a bit of a cryptic patch note. Good goal value has increased. All this means essentially is ambitions that required you to get a certain amount of good, like say get 400 ore, iron ore, now require you to get 500. So it's scaled up by 25% for all of them. Can no longer ask a nation to declare war on another nation if they're pleased or friendly with that nation. This sort of makes diplomacy a little bit more challenging. Right now, you can very easily ask nations to go to war with other nations, even if they're happy with those nations. This just makes that not possible. Quick pair of scenario balance changes. In the Barbarian Horde, tribes and tribe leaders can't convert to your religion anymore, which makes sense since they're trying to attack you, and can be weird if they become friendly because they convert to your religion. And for Carthage, there's various fixes in those scenarios as well. Adjusted the conditions which update able great cognomen to focus on legacies and ambitions. Thanks again to Xiao Mao for the data mining here. The TLDR here basically is it's harder to get able and great, and you get more points for getting ambition and legacies. So if you solve ambitions, if you complete ambitions or complete legacies, that will make you more likely to become the able great cognomen line. And it's less likely that you'll just get able and great without doing legacies and ambitions, which makes sense. I think it's a little too easy right now to get the great. So this makes it a little harder, but also makes it more important to focus on legacies and ambitions to do so. A map change on the Middle East pre-made map, the strait between Greece and Turkey has been adjusted there. Sadly, it's no longer possible to alt-click on event text to buy resources automatically. Apparently this is because it was leading to too many bugs, but it was nice. But I guess now you just have to be more thoughtful when you're buying resources for events. And the Learn to Play tutorial number 4 has a tutoring event tutorial. Moving on to the programming changes, knowledge comparisons now take tech progress into account. So if you have a bunch of techs that you haven't completed, but you've made some progress, or if you're researching a really expensive tech, the knowledge that you get while hovering over your opponent, in other words, whether it says they're erudite or naive or whatever, now takes into account their progress in a particular tech. Conveniently, you can now use your DLC if you're playing offline. There's a new luxury management panel added that can be viewed from reminders or the top bar interface. So here's what the luxuries panel looks like. If you click on the luxury icon, but you actually have luxuries, you'll get a list of what your current luxuries are and where you can send them, and you can manage whether you want to send them to family or whether you want to send them to cities or to other nations. It's a nice little change. There's also a new Pixelator UI. Here's the new Pixelator UI. So I started a game with Pixelator and for both nation and archetype, and I can select my nation and my archetype very nicely, and I can move the unit around. It doesn't automatically found as soon as I pick the nation, and then select my family as well, and then I can actually found with a separate button. So that's a very nice change. Super cool to see. There's also now a skip button in the in-game music player. Here's what it looks like. There's now a skip and disable current track. So if you're listening to the music and you don't like a particular song, you can just click this skip and disable current track button and it will go away. And then if you go to options and audio and scroll down through the long list of tracks, you can see that if you click that button, that track is now disabled, which is nice and convenient. You don't need to try to find what track is playing, looking for that checkbox. You can just instead just click that skip and disable button. Very nice change. Pressing shift while moving the camera will now increase the speed of the camera pan. So here we're panning around the camera. If we hold down shift, it pans a little bit faster, which is quite nice. Conveniently, right click will now close any screen that's opened via the top bar buttons, which is great. There's outlines for around some text to make it easier to see, and categories have been added to encyclopedia search results. And lastly, there's a whole bunch of bug fixes that I won't go into in detail, but always great to see these fixed. And that's that. All in all, nice small patch, lots of good changes. Really interested to see how that Tactician General plays out, especially with the full counterattack damage. Super excited to try that out. And I think the Freedom and Constitution change is also going to be pretty interesting. Makes Constitution a little more playable, maybe makes Slavery a little more attractive versus Freedom. So yeah, great patch. Looking forward to playing it once it goes live.